The Dragon Lord Legacy. Prologue. Soft brushing with tingles ran up and down his body. He felt wet, warm, and a gentle hum breach his senses. His mind was a fog, not lost in dark, but a gentle warmth on to be soon a bright morning. His mouth felt dry, longing for water or nourishment. His nose took in the smells, and everything blurred with musky rock, sulfur, and a familiar scent that brought him warmth in his heart. The brushing against his body continued, and it felt odd, as if he was being rubbed with a giant warm wet hard towel. Great against his scales, but still odd. Then it stopped. He kind of felt disappointed. Why did it stop? A soft whine left him, trying to gain back that wonderful feeling back. Then he heard a gasp. A muffled voice spoke through his ears. "Spike?" He knew that name. He knew that name because it was his name. The voice was warm, just like whatever it was that was brushing him. Warm and soft, like soft silk on a nice, clear, sunny day. She. That was what the voice was. A she. "Spike?" The voice spoke again. This time he gave a soft whine in acknowledgement. He wanted to move, but he felt fragile and tight, as if he hadn't really moved at all. Another gasp left her, and he felt hot air blow around him. Please awaken." It was gentle, yet eager. Why did she want him to awaken? Did she need him? Was she waiting for something? He was still stiff, blinded by the tightness of his body. He struggled and moved, slowly causing his limbs to awaken, and a soft moan of displeasure left his nostrils. He was also sore, as if he hadn't really used his ligaments in months. A large brushing feeling came over his body, warming him with wet warmth. It's alright. Take your time. Just, please, let me know when you're trying to wake up." A pitiful whine left him, and he tried to move his head. He twisted it softly to the left, then to the right. His claws twitched, and then he felt an ache in his back. A gleeful, restrained squeal left her, and she whispered to him, brushing herself against him. "Oh, my son! At last, you are coming back to us!" To whom? His mind was foggy. Where did he even go? Finally, with a soft cry of annoyance, he moved his head and he tried to open his eyes. He felt large crustings, keeping it from fully opening. He pawed at himself trying to remove them, but his claws missed and he sighed in annoyance. He felt the large wet warmth return and a brush along his face. He felt the wetness, albeit more sticky, as it cleared his face. It wasn't just one brush, but several. Slowly, the crusting came loose and he managed to open his eyes. As the last brush came, his vision slowly came as well. First very hazy, with colors blending with a low-lit area. Browns and reds along with blacks and orange filled his vision. He forcefully blinked his eyes, trying to adjust the lighting around him. Slowly but surely, his vision slowly began to deepen with details. The warmth that filled the air was the lava pool that he was not too far from, which also explained the smell of sulfur. He was in a large cave. The smell of it was wonderful. It smelled like security, wonder, coziness, and lastly, home. His emerald eyes then looked up at the deep violet eyes before him. Moisture formed near the edges of the eyes, which sparkled with their color in the light of the fires of the cave. No fear, no awe, no negative thoughts came to him when he saw her. On her muzzle was a gentle smile, something that made his heart beat with a glow. Her posture was protective, providing security to anything outside of his view, yet also showed some invitement, as if she wanted him to come a little bit closer to her. A small smile touched his own muzzle, and he slowly opened his mouth to speak the first time in months. Mother? Hello, my Spike. Oh, my dear, welcome back." Spike let out a yawn before looking around him. The cave was comfortable, but he felt something was missing, something else. He then looked up back to his mother. Mother? He stuttered, still trying to rework his jaw. His voice was deep, but not too strong or too rough. "Yes, my son?" Where is... Her features froze, waiting for the question. "Where is..." The sound of large footsteps entered the cave. "Love?" The voice echoed the cave. Spike tried to peer over his mother's shoulder. A large scarlet dragoness that towered over his mother came into view, carrying a large satchel on her side. "Mama?" Spike cried out. Cynthia stopped, seeing a woken Spike before her mate. Elienta held a smile on her face, tears on her eyes, and her posture was that of a mother introducing her hatchlings to the world. Spike?" she asked in a shocked state. "Mama!" he cheered, with his body trying to rise himself. However, his body was slow and wobbly. Fearing injury in his new awakened state, she quickly lifted the satchel from her side. throwing it off to the side, and made her way in a half-crawled motion where she settled herself down next to her mate, a warm but still shocked smile upon her muzzle.
Hello! Spike, it's so wonderful to see you awake.
She brushed her giant head against his little body. Spike leaned in and purred at his own right, while Elianza also leaned in, brushing her own muzzle towards him. The three dragons enjoyed each other's love, Spike practically feeling the love radiating from his two mothers. It was perfect for them, nothing but them. Their backs against the world and their son before them. Almost 10 minutes passed between the family, and Spike was the first to lean away from his mothers. Looking up at them, he looked at them with warmth, but then curiosity slowly kicking in.
Mama? Mother? Yes?
Both answered. However, Xynthia snorted and gave a look at her mate.
Wait, who was Mama and who's Mother?
She questioned her mate in a somewhat irritated but humorous manner.
Your Mama,
Spike explained, a small wag on his tail beginning and a big grin on his muzzle. Cynthia sighed a bit of annoyance when she looked at her mate. A large grin was plastered on her face.
You've been saying that to him in his sleep, haven't you?
Elianza kept her smirk, but then she focused on Spike. Leaning in, she brushed her snout against him, earning another purr from him before she pulled out lightly and spoke gently to him.
Spike, my son, what do you remember?
Spike cocked his head to the side.
Remember?
He asked, not sure if he really understood. Xynthia nodded.
Do you remember anything before awakening?
Spike looked confused. He then tried to recall something before waking up, blurry images of sapphire scales and his claws causing someone to be heard, with a few voices that were not his mother's, but there was sadness and pain. A phantom pain ran up from the tip of his tail to his spine, where he just let out a little shiver. He then turned his head to look down upon himself, trying to figure out what had caused it. He looked at his claws, then towards his spine. His wings, which he wondered if he always had them, felt tingly, but that's probably just because he hasn't really used them yet. They were okay. He gave a small stretch upon them, slowly opening the large purple membrane skin, albeit painfully and causing him to flinch. The two dragonesses watched as he spread out his wings, waiting for his reaction towards them. However, Spike merely inspected them, as if he knew he already had wings before looking down to his spine and down to his tail. He then looked up at them, giving a quizzical look.
I remember...
He paused, as if trying to describe the feeling on him currently.
I remember pain.
Both females flinched, and sorrow covered their features, in which Spike noticed.
I also remember sadness, and one of you crying. I remember I hurt someone.
His features turned sad and his voice somber.
Did I do something bad? Did I hurt one of you?
The truth, it was painful, and it hurt more to see the young Drake, who had just woken up not a moment ago, experience sadness at his past, let alone he couldn't remember much of it. Both females realized that perhaps Spike had lost his memories, ponies, the trials, his origins, and Ember. But for a moment, both hoped to spare the Drake his feelings and let him explore his innocence, but the reality would be that Spike would have to learn sooner or later what has been awaiting him. Just a moment, however, both females needed to quell on their son's sadness, and it was their duty to care for the needs of the young Drake. Leaning in, Elianza brushed her large snout against his smaller body, in which Spike almost eagerly returned.
No, my son,
she spoke softly.
Nothing that affected anyone. She is right, son.
Xynthia gently put in, as she too joined in the brushing against him.
You are too young, too kind to cause any pain.
With both mothers giving him love and the gentle words that he sought, his body relaxed and he knew warmth like never before. Silently, however, the two dragonesses held off and telling their dragon lord of his awakening. Spike was too weak to do much, nor did he really have the mental stability to handle what really was awaiting him if he were to step outside. For the time, his two mothers entertained him as he tried to recover from his long sleep. Tales of the time his advisor and successor were spun. They also slowly reintroduced his body to food such as gems, liquid, and if need be, meat. Then they helped him ease back into fully using his ligaments. It was difficult at first, with him struggling to get rid of the pain for not using them for months. First it was him trying to stretch his claws in and out of his palms from his arms and legs. Then came his tail, slowly moving it side to side and cracking any bones that he had in there. After came his wings, not really flapping them but stretching them out and then withdrawing them back in. Lastly was him trying to stand up, and due to his anatomy he was a biped, but he began to crawl on all fours. He felt a little bit embarrassed that he was learning how to crawl as a teenager. His mothers laughed at his struggling despite his age and size. He fell down enough times to the point where he felt like he would cry out in frustration. However, his mothers quickly helped and assured him that, with time, it would come naturally. And so, the rest of the time, the family of three stayed into the cave, ignoring the world outside, forgetting the past that lingered, and enjoying one another to the point where they felt complete. Spike had no other memories returned to him that day, and both Dragonesses knew that they would have to tell him, but today was not that day. They played with their son, laughing and enjoying each other in their own little games. Spike also enjoyed going into the lava pit, splashing in the lava and even throwing some at his mothers. The lava also helped him clean up and made him restart his fire breath. He surprised himself when he burped out a flame, causing him to jump in shock, which only allowed his mothers to have more fun at him. Reintroducing food was a small challenge, for his hunger was grand. However, he found out that he had favorites and dislikes from his mother's hoards. Rubies, sapphires, and emeralds were his favorite, but he didn't really like gold coins or copper. His mother, Xynthia, had left the cave earlier and brought 2 elk to eat. When she retrieved the dead carcasses, she had removed any fur by pulling off a couple of layers, after of which, she cut it into pieces with her claws and presented them to her son. Large slabs were put in front of him, and he stared at them with some hesitancy. Both females waited for him to start eating, but watched as he stared at the large slabs of red meat in front of him. Not sure of himself, he looked up at them.
What's wrong, son?
Asked Elianza. He was staring up at her and then looked back down, trying to find the words that he was looking for, yet not really sure how to answer.
I don't know if it's right to eat this.
Something clicked in both the females, and they glanced at each other. A knowing message was passed between them, without even speaking. He remembers ponies. His memories might not all be there, but he subconsciously knew that what he was eating might remind him of his past. Yet both knew that he would have to eat some meat in order to compensate for his recent growth. From the information that he's gathered from Ember from the Equestrians, Spike has only been raised on eating gems and nothing really much else. This caused him to stay at his current height and never really develop his wings early. When he fell into a coma, he had so much energy in his body stored that it began to expand in other ways. He went through multiple molts in the 8 months that he slept, rather than years most dragons do. His first molt had him grow wings. His next molt, he grew in length and body heat with his last molt. His body scales became stronger, and as is, his scales now surpassed diamond density along with sharper scales. Now that he had expanded all of that energy into quick and early molts, now he had to keep the energy in his body, not just with simple gems, but by iron located in the blood of other creatures. His mind, however, was still reeling that he had to eat another creature in order to stay active, healthy, and even alive. Easing him into it, Elianza answered her son.
My dear sweet Drake, it's necessary for you to eat the meat in order to stay strong and healthy. I know you may think that it might be different, but I know that you will not have to worry about it.
He listened, but he still felt an odd feeling in his stomach. He half wondered if that was because he was feeling hungry for it, or because something was nagging in the back of his mind about it. It was his second mother who weighed in and helped him.
My son, if you truly don't wish to eat it, then don't eat it. But, as your mother said, you need it to retain your energy and become stronger.
A half whimper left him, and he looked up at both of his mothers with sorrowful eyes.
So, I have to kill another creature to live?
It was a question never asked by normal hatchlings. Every dragonborn never questioned their sires or dams where the food came from. They ate, they consumed, and they never questioned why. The fact is, some meat is hard to come by here in the Dragonlands, with dragons only hunting in long periods of time. After they grew past the teenager state, their bodies could be sustained enough through gems, but with high amounts needed or fish that was easily obtainable from the rivers and oceans nearby. They weren't the tastiest, but they kept the dragon from completely losing their minds on eating meat. Spike's case was that he never really had neither, and it put him on the spot with his hidden memories holding him back. This could prove dangerous or even fatal for him in the future. It was Elianza's experience and intelligence that would hopefully make him understand this.
There is a balance, my son,
she began softly, and her eyes went a bit vacant as she began to tell him something that she had learned from her own mother.
There is a balance in the world, and it must be upheld. When you receive, you must give it back. What energy you take, you must return it.
She then reached over and pointed her large claw at the slab of meat before him.
They are our energy, our source to remain in this world, and they are what keeps us forward. The same energy that we use, we will return it one day. Whether through the droppings we leave so it could help the green expand and grow, or the time of our deaths and our bodies return to the earth. We return the energy. As long as you understand that balance, and you take care of it, never hunting or eating more than your fill, you will never truly hurt the balance.
She paused and pointed with her snout to the meat.
You, I, and your mother all share that balance. We as dragons, as sentient creatures, must and will respect it. Never, ever let a hunt be for game or pleasure. Be quick and make sure that the creature never suffers. But please, eat, my son, for you need it. You need not to suffer.
She paused and smiled.
If you truly don't feel right about eating another creature, then pray. Every time you eat or before you take upon flesh, pray to the creature and thank it for providing nourishment for you. Give thanks for its energy, then wish it a proper return to the next life, for a better or for a safer afterlife.
Spike looked up at his mother in wonderment and awe, her words easing him from his guilt with a confidence that made his heart beat a little easier. He looked down at the meat before trying to think of something to pray, but just couldn't. So, how do I pray to it? Elianza turned to Cynthia as the large dragoness thought for a moment before closing her eyes.
As I feast upon you, I pray that my claws were quick and sharp. As I take a bite upon your flesh, I pray that your life next be grand and renewed. As I take your energy to be given to me, I pray for the balance to remain strong and just.
She then opened her eyes and nodded.
That is a proper and more traditional way of doing it. You may do so silently if you wish. Few dragons know of the old ways, but if you are truly needing to eat and not have time to say it at all, speak truthfully when you do.
She then slightly bowed her head and closed her eyes.
Thank you for your body, and may your soul be renewed, and I pray for the balance.
She then reopened her eyes and looked at him.
After you have finished eating, whatever you do not eat, make sure that the leavings are left so other creatures could feast on it, or bury them so the earth retakes some of its energy.
Spike nodded and he closed his eyes with a small bow of his head. Both females watched for a moment as he held himself like that, silently joining. He then looked up and gave a small smile. I feel better now. Pride filled their hearts and Elianza gave a happy growl.
Good, my son. Now, please, eat. We wouldn't want your food to spoil.
He looked back down and then the sickening feeling that was there earlier had all but left. Even the small tickling at the back of his mind left, and he took a sniff, inhaling the dead carcass. The smell of iron-rich blood, some rotten earthly tones filled his nostrils. He didn't really know what kicked his trigger, but when he did, he dove straight in and didn't hold back. They all ate silently. While Spike tore at his food, his mothers picked and pecked in small pickings of their food. If they were really to eat, they could eat the elk in one bite, so they savored their food. When the feeding was done, so was their energy. Spike hadn't really known that the day had gone and went, but his mother's energies were well spent. He had some to spare, but he was too cautious along with his mother's that he shouldn't really go outside yet. For now, he continued to exercise his body and continued to get used to his limbs. The night approached the family as did the coldness that it brought. Now that he was awake, Spike no longer had to sleep away from his mothers. Instead, he could sleep with them. The earth beneath where they slept was nice and warm along with their giant bodies. He rested in between his mama's forearms where she created a sort of surrounding for him. Elianza laid near Cynthia's forearms in her own. Cynthia then rested her head over on top of her mate's head. Spike rested near Elianza's head where their day's activities had worn them down. So, are we going to go outside tomorrow? He asked them.
We will see, my little Drake,
Cynthia gently answered.
You have yet to fully recover, and we want you to be ready.
But I am ready now, he half-whined. I can walk and even move.
Yes, my son, but we must be patient. After all, you have yet to experience the world as is. Small steps must be taken before we leave.
He sighed but nodded in agreement. A yawn left him involuntarily. If I slept for so long, why am I so tired now? Both dragonesses chuckled.
Well, now that you have been back to your body's normal routine, you might understand that you will go back to sleeping the same time as us.
But I'm not even that tired. His mother thought for a moment and hummed softly.
Perhaps a lullaby will help you sleep, my son.
He then looked up at her, wondering what she meant. She then brushed against him lightly.
Close your eyes, and I will help you fall asleep.
He softly nodded and then lied his head against hers. Cynthia closed her eyes, for she knew that her mate's beautiful voice would also put her to sleep. She inhaled and softly exhaled, giving her some room to speak, and began softly with a hum that started it. And soon after, Spike was softly snoring, having almost immediately fallen asleep to her lullaby. Her beloved was not there yet, so she continued to hum her tune, softly and without a missed beat, going into the night until her own tune set her into a gentle, blissful sleep. That night, A family of 3 slept together with a love that transcended many others. Ember opened her eyes and felt the scepter in her claw glow warm. She then looked up and down it and wondered what it meant, and turning to her side, Amethyst and Smolder were laying against the warm body behind them, sleeping lightly with both holding each other.
Something amiss, my teardrop?
Ember looked up to find the giant head of her mother looking down at her. Ember shrugged softly.
I am not really sure, but the scepter is telling me something.
Her mother purred, trying not to wake her daughter's horde.
Perhaps something is to come? Oh, but what?
She asked. The large sapphire dragoness leaned her head down to her daughter, showing a glint in her eye.
Perhaps something that you have been missing for. Perhaps it's something that you have needed for almost a year now.
The dragoness brushed her maw against her daughter.
As a mother, I believe that something grand is upon us, and it will begin soon. Your rule, your life, whatever becomes of you and your horde, that, my teardrop, will begin your legacy.